Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Follow us, likes, double tap. Now they control your life, control your life. Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Follow us, like.
Welcome back, everyone, to a bonus episode of the 817 podcast.
Here we go.
We are excited today to sit down with Chris Cobler, who is the CEO of the Fort Worth Report, which is a new nonprofit news site here in Fort Worth, focused on really hyper-local news and just trying to amplify the voice of journalism in Fort Worth right now. He was previously the editor at the Victoria Advocate and was hired in February, which is when they announced the Fort Worth Report, and they launched in early April. So here's Chris, and we're excited to have him on.
Sure. Well, I'm Chris Cobler, and my Fort Worth story is all about the Fort Worth Report. We're a new national, I don't know why I said national, but a nonprofit, local, very local, nonprofit, a nonpartisan news organization. The really the opposite of national. We're about as local as you possibly could be. We see are coming in to fill the gap that's there in local journalism. There have been a lot of national studies out in recent times about the fact that there's just such a dwindling amount of journalism happening locally, and that's hurting our democracy. I'll pause with that just a moment, because I know we're going to explore that topic a lot more and just talk about how we came to be at the Fort Worth Report. If you go to the fortworthreport.org, you'll find us and all about our mission and our local news coverage. But there were a group of community leaders who came together several years ago, saw what was happening in the state of local journalism, and started looking at what can we do about that? How can we address that? And they started doing their own investigations and talked to people at the Texas Tribune and at the San Antonio Report and other nonprofit news organizations that are out there, and realized that this was really the growing trend in what's happening in local journalism. It's the answer to the fact that Google and Facebook have devoured all the advertising out there. You know, more than $35 billion of advertising's been lost by newspapers over the last decade or so. So the traditional print newspaper is really struggling. They've slashed their jobs by more than half since 2008. More than 2,000 newspapers have closed entirely. It has to be a different path forward for local journalism. And so that's where the nonprofit news organization stepped into being. And these community leaders who got together and started looking at what to do, connected with another organization called News Revenue Hub, which is another nonprofit that helps nonprofit news organizations come together. They did some research in the Fort Worth area and some focus groups, and started talking to people about what they wanted to see. And what people said is, they said there's just not enough of the meat and potatoes news coverage out there. There's not enough coverage of local government, of education, of arts and culture, of business, of health. We want to see more of the kind of information that helps us be more informed citizens, helps us get engaged in our community and vote and hold government accountable. We need more of that. So because they saw that need, these community leaders were able to go to the Burnett Foundation and get some seed money of $1.25 million grant to get us up and running, to get a small new staff hired. They did a national search, and I was lucky enough for one of our board members, John Lumpkin, to find me. He was familiar with my work from the Victoria Advocate, where I was editor and publisher, and I just jumped at this opportunity. I mean, Fort Worth is a great city with a lot happening and deserves great local journalism. So it's a very exciting time for me and for the Fort Worth Report.
Yeah, no, I think what I'm curious is, as someone who graduated with a journalism degree and had the pleasure of being on the panel with you for Leadership Fort Worth, what is kind of the vision for the Fort Worth Report in such a challenging time to create a sustainable organization? Do you see that? Do you see that it's the pipeline's going to be kind of continuous grants through like a Texas Tribune model in a way. What is kind of that vision, and how's that support been locally here in Fort Worth and helping getting Fort Worth Report off the ground?
Yeah, I'm very thankful. There have been a lot of nonprofit news organizations that have come into being and sort of blazed this path for us. The Texas Tribune is one you mentioned that's definitely been hugely successful in Texas and across the country. Really, they've been a great example for how to do it. Although they're a little different because their work is at a state policy level. A lot of state issue reporting, and ours is local journalism. But the funding model is very much the same. We're all part of the Institute for Nonprofit News, which has almost 300 nonprofit news organizations across the country, some small, some large, and they all go with a sort of a variety of revenue mix. Grant money is certainly a big part of it. Individual giving is a big part of it. Membership is a big part of that revenue stream. Also corporate sponsorship and advertising, events. And now that we're hopefully all coming out of the pandemic and getting vaccinated, that we can start doing more events. So it's this sort of this mix of revenue that makes it sustainable. And the membership model that everybody's probably familiar with from public radio, I guess, is the thing I compare it the most to. Is it's more like what you hear KERA doing their pledge drives. And so we're doing the digital version of those pledge drives and different things all the time, which is good because we're already immediately collaborated with KERA to do a mayor's forum on May 18th. So they're a great partner already. And what I found so much in bringing them up and the Texas Tribune and others is in this space of nonprofit news, people are so collaborative and willing to help each other because we all see it. We're all in this together. We see this as we help local news in Fort Worth. If we can help local news in San Antonio, if we can help local news, you name the city, we're helping our democracy. And I've just been sort of blown away by how much people in the nonprofit news org, I just pick up the phone and ask them, how should we do this? How are you doing? What success have you had? What failures have you had? And they would just pour their heart out and tell me what's working for them. And it's just been so gratifying to see. And the reception in Fort Worth has been much the same too. I've just been so impressed with our board members and all the doors they've opened. When I start talking to people here locally about what we're trying to do and why we're doing it, boy, they get it right away and they want it. They say, thank you. I'm just, we're used to, I guess we've seen what the national media do and the reaction to that and the kind of negative reaction people have understandably to a lot of that. But when you're talking at the local level, it's been so refreshing to see the difference that people say, gosh, we want you reporting on what's going on in the city council and on our school board. And we want to know what's happening in our communities and what's happening in our world-class museums. We want all these things. So thank you. And how can I help you? I mean, that's been the reaction we get. And that still means there's a lot of work to do to get towards sustainability, but I'm very optimistic that we'll get there.
Cool. Yeah. What is like exactly the hole or niche that y'all are trying to fill that's different from the Star Telegram, different from Fort Worth Weekly, Fort Worth Magazine, all those other publications we have? What are y'all's goals in reporting?
Yeah, our goal is to I guess I boil down our mission statements on our website, but I boil it down to these sort of 3 words: is to educate, engage, and empower. And a lot of news organizations do that in some way, shape, or form. Our difference is we're very decidedly, very intentionally nonpartisan, just straight ahead news reporting. We don't have a traditional opinion page and won't be endorsing candidates. That's not what we're doing. We're not advocacy journalism. Our advocacy is only just for bringing good local journalism and helping the community understand itself and make better decisions based on that. But we're not, I want to stress it too, we don't consider ourselves in competition with any of the fine organizations you mentioned at all. We consider what we're doing to be additive to it. There's just not enough going on. When we did our research, again, there was just so many gaps in the coverage, and not because they're they're very good journalists out there. They're just not enough for them. And newspapers across the country have slashed their newsrooms by more than half in the last dozen years or so. I mean, there's just not enough local journalists out there. So we're filling those gaps and doing it in a very intentionally nonpartisan sort of way. And people tell us they just want straight ahead news. They don't want any spin or any opinion. And when you look at the national media, I guess what I think is so troubling for a lot of people is that there's not good distinctions between the news, the entertainment, the opinion. When you turn on any of the network channels these days or cable channels, and you don't know where the news starts and the opinion stops. So you don't know where that goes. You just every program we watch, it's like, where is this going? And ours is, we try to make it very clear. It's just about the news. So that's what we're trying to do. And I would think people will definitely respond to that.
What is we talk about media versus journalism, and I think that that difference there is
right.
What is your how do you think we bring journalism back to, we bring it back to its value that, the normal citizen appreciates it and stands for it? One of the things we talked about on the panel was how people will pay high quality produce at Whole Foods. And now we have, journalism is high quality information to feed our brain. What is you think the barriers, and the potential to get journalism back separated from that noise that we're talking about, and that's entertainment media, infotainment, if you would.
Infotainment, yeah, and it is a challenge for sure because obviously a lot of media out there figured out that you give people what they want, the lowest common denominator, it can make a lot of money. But I still think, though, that people want what journalism brings, and I've always wanted that. It's really the newspaper's business model that was disrupted over the years. It's not that the journalism newspapers were producing was bad. It's that all the advertising dollars are gone, and it was a beautiful business model back in the day that your advertising could pay for the production and distribution of the newspaper, and many times over, and support a newsroom very easily. That business model's gone. Print newspapers just don't have classified advertising anymore. They don't have any kind of real display advertising, and the digital advertising has all gone to Google and Facebook. And so people think that their news now is adequate what they might get in their Facebook newsfeed that their crazy cousin might be posting that has no link to reality, and it's pretty scary. But I still talk to a lot of people who say they want reliable local information, that they seek out where to find it, and they're willing to pay for it. I mean, I think that's something we've seen just in starting out. We're barely a month old, and we've got over 250 different individual donors who are just doing based on the idea that we're doing this, really, more than anything else. So, and people will leave these tremendously generous comments saying things along with their generous dollars, saying, we want this so much in Fort Worth. We think local news is so important to our democracy, to our city, to our community. And, if when we look at it towards the sustainability, if we had a small percentage of the people in Fort Worth, there's almost 1 million people now, supporting us at $10 a month, we'd easily have be sustainable toward a significantly sized newsroom that could do a lot of local reporting. And so that's sort of the goal we're getting to. I don't think we're ever going to get, everybody in a community to support any news organization in the way that they used to support a daily newspaper back when I was born and a kid growing up, when everybody got the newspaper. I mean, literally everybody pretty much had it on their driveway. I don't think that those days are not coming back, but I do think there's still a huge appetite for being informed and caring. I still believe that. My two kids are not the typical kids, but they're journalists. One working at the Austin American Statement, and one at the Baton Rouge Advocate. And I saw all their friends though growing up who weren't journalists, and they were all bright, caring, really engaged young people who want the best for their community. And I think the community is still full of people like that. Mm-hmm. And the message is for all of us involved in local journalism, one way or another, is connecting with them and doing the outreach with them and proving day after day, story after story, and community speaking engagement one after another, that what we're doing is valuable and reliable. And I think if we just deliver on that promise, that people will respond.
Yeah. So what does it look like bringing a staff on? How big is the staff now, and what did hiring them look like? And for those of them that aren't local, what has it been like to familiarize yourself and all of them with Fort Worth?
Right. Yeah. It's been a quick run up from the day I got hired February 1st to the day we launched April 12th. And in that time, we hired our Chief Development Officer, Trish Rodriguez-Terrell, who's former Fort Worth Star-Telegram features editor, longtime journalist, University of Missouri journalism grad, who also had gone off and worked in the nonprofit and fundraising and advertising world. So she was perfect for that role, and obviously great also to really connect the staff as we're hiring to Fort Worth. And she helped us as we founded our first Reader Advisory Council, very diverse group that we wanted intentionally to get us very grounded in Fort Worth, the cross section of the community, and give us feedback on what we're trying to do. From there, hired our managing editor, Thomas Martinez, a longtime newspaper journalist I'd worked with for many, many years, just tremendously talented, especially in the digital world where we live. We're all digital, so we've got to be strong at that. And then hired our first three reporters. Jessica Priest is an investigative reporter with USA Today Network, really sharp, good local government accountability, really critical to our success there. And Jacob Sanchez, who's was a print reporter at the Temple Daily Telegram, and he's focused a lot on education and other areas. And then from UT Arlington, Natish Basnet, who'd been working with the Fort Worth Business Press, he's came on board as our third reporter. So we've got a staff of, including me, 6 right now, where we just got funding for 3 summer fellows. So we have 3 more reporters coming on board. Yeah, it's very exciting. So we're doubling the staff, and can't announce it yet, but we're close to funding for another reporter position as well too. So I mean, we're growing, and that's what's exciting. And as we are growing, to get all these folks acquainted with and very familiar with and embedded in Fort Worth and Tarrant County, along with the Reader Advisory Council that we created. We've been organizing the speaker series of people in the community to just come and talk with our staff and just give them background conversations about what's important and what are the key issues. It was really good for the staff that these important May 1st elections were happening, because that was our first coverage. Our focus was just about all that. So we all spent a lot of time talking with the candidates about the issues and reporting on those issues. It's really been perfect in that way. I mean, if you're trying to get people really on track about what matters to the community, I think talking to a bunch of candidates who are running and voters who care and people who are passionate about what's important to the future of the city, that's about the best time you could do. And people over and over have told me that this is a pivotal time in Fort Worth's history. It really is. That there's going to be a change in leadership in Fort Worth. Fort Worth has obviously boomed like crazy and continues to boom. And who's going to step up and be the leaders of the modern day and future Fort Worth?
What would be your I don't know how aspirational journalists are in the sense of, young people getting involved in journalism. You have people like us who do podcasts, and people are consuming information so differently today. How do you see what I guess creative ways is Fort Worth Report going to do to get more young people into journalism? But then also, what is your ask from young people in Fort Worth as well, who may have never seen a newspaper or never actually understood the difference from AP, Reuters, Fort Worth Report compared to the things that they're reading on their Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, things like that?
Well, the ask is really, I think, what they're already doing, caring, right? That's the ask. I want young people to care about the community. And I think by and large they are. The challenge for us is to connect what we're doing with what they care about. And so we've got to go where they are. Our internship fellowship program is a great way to do that. We just had a good meeting with TCU and planned to, and have had discussions with all the local universities about that too, because we've got to get very involved with what the universities are doing, and just get the young people involved in what the Fort Worth Report is all about. Because I just can't stress enough, I guess, as how much I think that young people do care, and they do want it. They are seeking out information, and I think things like your podcast are a reaction to that. I've seen what you do, and EJ, and looked at some of the student motivational speeches you give, which I think are terrific. I mean, I really think the answer to everything, it goes back to education. In terms of being aspirational as a journalist, mine is that part I said about educating and engaging and empowering. It starts with educating. In the finest sense of that word, you're trying to get people to inform themselves, educate themselves about the issues, and then figure it out from there. And we've got to make that resonate with them. I mean, I think about my father, who was when he was young and poor, one of 11 kids, and most of his older brother and sisters had to drop out of school by 8th grade to work in the family. He was lucky in the fact that in the birth order, he was 7th, the 11th kid, so he could stay in school through high school. And he did, but he still was, he never thought he could go to college. It just wasn't his world view. It wasn't his reality to do that. And he was just going to work at the meat packing plant, and that was fine, I guess. I mean, nothing wrong with good, hard work, honest work, but he didn't see much of his horizon going into beyond that at all. He got drafted in the Marines during the Korean War, and that really changed his world. Fortunately, he survived and didn't see combat, but that he, in that time in the Marines, he'll tell that story, very inspirational in my childhood, about how that was the first time he just realized, because they had tested him, and he realized he was smart and he could do other things, and he succeeded in the Marines, and he decided when he came out of the Marines he was going to be a CPA, and he did that, and when he did that and became a success over many hard years of work, it just changed. That one generational changed it for his 4 kids. It was just expected we were all going to go to college. But that was just that changed it by educating one person. And local journalism can't do all that. And it still goes back individually, but it can tell the stories of people, the success stories of people who've made it work, who've have had opportunity, and you can also tell the stories of all the programs and the people who are working to make a difference. You can write about whatever educational movement is making a difference in the Fort Worth ISD, the programs, the innovations. I think it's really important, again, that local journalism not just exposes wrongdoing, and that's certainly important, and holds government accountable, which is also important, but also celebrates the success so that people feel like there is a path forward. And I think that's what's really critical is Fort Worth it builds up its community, getting more of its young people, more of them educated and successful, and encourage more innovation and entrepreneurship. I mean, there's so many possibilities in Fort Worth, and local journalism is just a key part of that in terms of success and civic life.
Yeah.
And if we want Fort Worth to keep its uniqueness and its character, it's got to have that civic engagement that young people are going to bring to that conversation.
And it's interesting, and like you talk about how people, how young people consume news, and Chris, you're talking about education. Like, is there a publication locally, nationally, statewide that utilizes a medium like TikTok well? And I'm just wondering, like, what is the potential space there for a nonpartisan publication to come in and use a new medium for news consumption to engage young people? Especially, like, I think we're going to see with this most recent election, like, once again, the average voting age is most likely going to be 60 plus, even though it seemed like there was energy around it. And so it's like, yeah, how do we use these new mediums to engage and educate young people in consuming news? Right.
Yeah. The Washington Post actually has a good TikTok, but I need the guy who does that. He does a great job. But all the new platforms require new expertise. And I think also another way to do that, while we're intentionally set up our new offices in a coffee shop, because we think young people might more likely to come in and have a conversation over coffee than they would in some office building, many stories up. I don't think that's going to happen as much. But I think the outreach is really important. Not just come to us at the coffee shop, but we have to go out to wherever they are, whatever events they're doing, and be very visible and present, and writing about the things that they care about too. And certainly city elections are not high on the list necessarily of what every young person is thinking about. But they're but you want to, I think about how I consumed newspaper when I was young. I started consuming the newspaper when I was very young by reading sports and reading Dear Abby and reading the comics. That's what I read. So you have to figure out what things that you bring them to the news that you're delivering. And then while they're there, they'll get more interested in the rest of the news that is there. So it's trying to be offer a smorgasbord, right?
And I guess kind of my last question for it as well is, and this is so like I'm interested from the operational side when you pull back the curtain from true journalism. As someone who gets to distill the Star Telegram paper and actually gets it delivered daily, I feel like what I feel like is challenge is there's always a lot of stories about crime, education, and politics, and like you said, city council. And I know with I have empathy in the sense of I know how little time journalists have to really go off of those tracks. Like I assume, and tell me if I'm wrong, I assume that crime is easy to report because you're getting it from the city and then you get the report of what was put in, they document it. So then it's easy to write about. So then therefore it's naturally, there's more crime stories in a paper when there's maybe less positive stories. So then even someone who is young, who might consume the paper, you might feel like there's a lot of maybe negativity or things that because of, you only have so much time and things like that. So how I guess, do we find more niche aspirational, stories and give journalists that breadth and opportunity to find those magic points, like the one that Natish did that was awesome about the guy with the museum, you know, like at the forward, like that was an awesome story. I don't know how he found it. I don't know how you guys found time to do that, but like little things like that I think is that separator. I mean, I love that story. That was a great report. That was a great story. So what is your thoughts on how do you guys find time to help journalists do more of that?
That's a great question, EJ. And you're really right about crime news. Let's start with that point, is that it is easy to report. You're right. There is just a lot of it out there, and you can get it from police sources and things like that. But it's also high traffic. It's also, that's the other problem with it. People click on that and they'll read that for sure. Every paper across the country, if you want to look at what has the most clicks, it'll be crime news. But we're very intentionally not doing crime news. We say that's our research showed people say they get enough of it. Well, again, we're talking about filling gaps. And so there's no gap in crime coverage out there. So we're not, we don't need to tell people about the car crash out there or the shooting or the stabbing. We're not going to do that. And I agree with you too, that the problem with that is if you let yourself get consumed with crime coverage, it creates a very distorted view of the community. If it ends up to half your coverage ends up being crime news, then you think, gosh, I live in a scary city, and it's not full of all these wonderful people that I thought it was full of all these wonderful, interesting people out there. But all I'm hearing about is a shooting, next door or wherever it is, and it's really problematic for news organizations in general. So that's what I think the way you respond to that and support that is to support a nonprofit news organization like the Fort Worth Report that is saying from the get-go of our mission that crime news is not it. Our mission is writing about local journalism, community. I call it community reporting because that's where my career has been spent, is in community journalism. Really serving as a connector, convener of conversations. I think that's what's so fun, and writing about the people who are doing really interesting, important things around the community. I want to do more of those kind of stories, like the Fort Worth Museum story you're talking about. Certainly, we have to hold government accountable, and if we don't do that, then then we all end up paying more in taxes and all those things. We have to do those things, and those are really core to our mission too. But we also have to celebrate the good parts of our community so that we get just a truly representative view of our community. I mean, Fort Worth is this wonderful, diverse community with all these different people who are coming in, bringing all their energies and talents. And, we want to reach out to all them and have everyone included in what we're reporting. So that encourages more success. I mean, I'm just a big believer in the fact that when we are all working together, again, in a nonpartisan sort of way, then great things happen in the community. And that's, I'm not saying that happens because of local journalism by any means, but it happens from people who are educated about what's going on and then engaged in what's going on. And then they feel like they can make a difference in what's going on. And that's local journalism brings that to the table. It helps people see what's possible. And without it, if they're just looking on Facebook or they're just looking at the crime news, they don't see that anything much is possible. They see a very dark view of our community, and we see that nationally, and it's scary. I don't think any of us wants that the national reality of what we're seeing to be the Fort Worth reality. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's tough because I could continue to ask you tons of questions, and we appreciate the time that you have given us. I will go off of one more question since we started a little bit. But first, one, really excited for the Fort Worth Report. For those of you who are listening who haven't went, fortworthreport.org. Excited to, be an annual subscriber to the Fort Worth Report and, adding it to the portfolio of information and subscriptions. I love the charts, the interactive charts, how you guys, make that happen. But my last question, what I want to ask is what is your opinion on the kind of this, singular journalism in a way of like I don't know if you're aware of like Substack and all these kind of, these platforms, what do you see is going to be different for journalism? You talk about newspaper to business model. What do you see like the next kind of 10 to 30 years going to look like for journalism? At the core, journalism doesn't change, but at the core of how we support journalists and maybe have subscriptions, where do you see that going? Moving forward.
Well, to do professional journalism that is ethically done and by trained journalists. I mean, it costs money. It definitely costs money, and people are going to have to just pony up to that like you have, EJ, and I appreciate that very much, and support the efforts of the Fort Worth Reporter, many others like those, anyone that they like, because it is very difficult to do it individually. Substack, I've been watching that. I'm familiar with that a little bit. I think individually you can do a lot of interesting things, but it's hard to get unless you join together in some way, it's hard to rise above the noise and have people find you and recognize the work that you're doing. I mean, there are certainly breakout examples of people who do that successfully. But whether it's in my experience, it takes people supporting a group of people who are doing something to get the most effective journalism performed. I don't see print newspapers being around in 5 or 10 years. I don't think that model is going to be here at all. So what fills that void, the immediate future, I think what's filling it right now are these nonprofit news organizations. We're going to keep seeing more and more of them. Certainly there's space for individuals to try to do that as well and innovate. I'm sure figure out things that I'm not dreaming of. I'll look to our new interns who are starting this summer to fill me on what's happening for sure. But I think that the future of journalism is really at a crossroads, just like Fort Worth is at a crossroads. And I think if we can all come together and figure it out together, we'll have something exciting going on. But I'm not pessimistic by any means. I mean, I'm certainly a realist that we're losing local journalism at a scary, scary rate right now. Yeah. And if we don't reverse that trend, our communities are going to be in trouble. And I think then that but I do think the reason I'm optimistic about it is because I do see people who want quality journalism, who want to know what's going on. They want vetted information. I mean, I don't see a lack of appetite for that. It's really up to us as the journalists and the innovators out there to figure out how to satisfy that hunger.
Yeah. Love it. Well,
yeah, thank you so much for your time and just for being a part of this organization. I know that when it was announced, EJ and I were both really excited, and I feel like some of the most excited people were the Star Telegram young reporters. Because we've all seen the need for it, and we're really excited that you're here.
Great. Well, and again, the journalism community, we really are a good, strong community of people who care about each other. And the work that you're both doing is tremendous. I mean, I was watching and listening to some of it, and I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan too. And I just think the more of us could come into this space and work together, great things will happen. So I appreciate both of your support very much and the support of everybody in the community.
Awesome. Well, Chris, enjoy Mother's Day and the rest of your weekend. And it seems like you got a lot of busy things going on as you have new team members coming in.
Yeah, we have a lot happening. I just want to give it. We're recording on Mother's Day. I want to give a quick shout out to my wife, Paula, who is an amazing person. I couldn't do any of what I'm doing without her, and she's a longtime journalist and now in marketing communications. But awesome. We're a family of journalists, and so she's incredible, and my mother is incredible too. So I want to say happy Mother's Day to her and all the moms out there. Although this will be broadcast later, I do want to give a Mother's Day shout out.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you. And we'll keep you posted and looking forward to awesome articles.
All right. Thank you so much.
Take care, Chris. All right. So there was Chris. What a great guy.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that conversation.
He gives me like a scientist vibes. Like I feel like he could be like, you know, telling state of the address of important issues and not get phased on tough conversations. Cause he just seems keen and smart. I mean, when he said his dad was like a CPA, I was like, you gave me like, you're just brass tacks accountant style. Like, you just know what's up.
What'd you take away from it?
Man, I that could have lasted another 30, 45 minutes for me, because as someone who is passionate of journalism, I saw a world where I cared about journalism, where I wanted it to be a profession. And I just think the state of what's interesting is like the state of the environment of how we consume information is being challenged, right? He talked about the billions of dollars. I think he said $35 billion of ad revenue that was in newspapers that now went to Google and Facebook. And, you know, today we're now realizing the consequences of allowing Facebook's business model to work, where they got us more addicted to our phones, because that's how they got ads, is by showcasing time and clickbait. And so I don't know. It just got me super fired up of thinking about how is our generation, as we start building, you know, exposable income, how do we look at the value of journalism in our lives to help fund things like the Fort Worth Report?
Yeah, and you and I were just doing some basic math of like, if you're talking Fort Worth Star-Telegram and Dallas Morning News, and you want to support the Fort Worth Report, and maybe you want to support KRA and NPR also, and then you go to the New York Times and the Washington Post, which doesn't even give you any free articles anymore.
Yeah.
It's like we're turning into needing some sort of like cable environment to like allow people to afford reading good, high quality journalism, because right now it's like you could easily be putting down $100, $150, $200 a month just on news subscriptions.
Yeah.
And that's not an accessible thing for a large portion of the population.
Yeah. You're really getting into it. Yeah. Like this idea that subscription is the answer to I think it's going to work. Like you said, 1 million people, you know, you get, what do you say? You get 1,000, 10,000 people.
Yeah.
There you go. You know, and it's, and the concept there, it's free for everyone. So it's like a, crowd source. It kind of makes sense in a way, but I think for like, even in just like, when you look at our grandparents' bills, right? They probably had like, they didn't have a phone. They didn't have internet. You have like water, electric, very basic. And our generation is like, you have Netflix, you have YouTube TV, you have Spotify, you have, now if you want to care about journalism, you have journalism. And we're just becoming a subscription-based place. And I think software companies and business models are going to eventually get pressed on where we're going to have to consolidate ourselves. So yeah, I think that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like it's maybe even a product of like a culture driven by corporations, where your paycheck comes every 2 weeks or maybe every month.
Yeah.
And companies started to realize like, oh, if you want to budget, like you budget based on your monthly paycheck. So let's create an environment where if $100 feels like too much to spend at one time, like let's do something smaller every paycheck to continue that going. And
that can get out of hand.
Yeah, and that gets out of hand really quickly.
Yeah.
And journalism is just kind of another entry into that culture.
Yeah. And even from a business model, recurring revenue is the sexiest, in the sense of like, and so it's and I just want, man, I think a part of starting this podcast and reading the news so much is like, it's so hard to find the truth. And it's just good to know there's people like Chris and now the Fort Worth Report who seem really focused. I love, he said, no crime.
Yeah.
You know, like we're not going to endorse.
Well, and that's
we're not going to opinions.
Yeah, that's always been our biggest complaint with the Star Telegram is it's like you open it up, you see 20 crime stories, and there's a reason for that. And you know, Chris helped shed some light on that. But it's like, yeah, what do you vote for if you're constantly exposed to here's 20 stories about murder and one story about a new highway? Like, yeah, if someone comes around and says like, I'm going to keep your neighborhood safe, you're like, well, yeah, like I don't want that to happen in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
So it really like makes sense and all sort of works together to create a lot of what we feel like we're having to try and undo and unpack as a society right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully you enjoyed it, and check out the Fort Worth Report at fortworthreport.org. Some like awesome detailed stories, and I love the diversity of the journalists team. I think they're being very intentional how they grow, and it was awesome talking to Chris.
Yeah, thanks, and we'll see you on Monday.
Dopamine swipe, follow us, likes, double tap. Now they control your life, control your life. Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe, follow us, like double tap. Now they control your life, control your life.